PEC Education is one of the leading PTE Test training providers in Dhaka, Bangladesh. PEC Education started its journey in 2016 with providing one-stop PTE academic supports and services. There are several PTE courses that PEC offers both online and on campus to its students. All of the PTE courses includes PTE study materials and free PTE mock tests. Please call for detailed information PTE course preparation and services to 01713167969 or visit the website www.pecpte.com.
Let's say if I'm asking which source you often use to get information, newspaper, radio, TV, and the survey shows 62% of the people chose internet. You might be thinking I am going to say how important the internet is, or how quickly it has changed the world for a few years. But what if I tell you this survey is conducted on the website globeandmail.com? Our answer will be different because the people who did this survey on a website must be frequent users of internet. This sample is a biased sample, so we have to pay attention to how a survey is conducted.
A survey conducted on the internet shows that about 62% of people would look up the internet to get information and news. But the survey itself is conducted on the internet, making it a biased survey. If it were taken from an external source which doesn't involve sample only from a single source, the result would have been different. So, we also need to look at the source and parameters how and from where information has been taken.
The comics I show you with lots of people chatting around in a room is a form of description. We use different kinds of methods to describe a situation. Sometimes we have to use visual description, particularly when we do not witness the scenario. I was born during the Second World War, and my hometown is X. For example, when I asked my mother about the war, I always ask her, "You have mentioned this or that when you talked to me when you asked her about the shelter. I asked her what the shelter looks like and when did you go to the shelter." From her response, I could get more visual evidence as I can to write my book.
We use different methods to give a description on something. One such is visual description. It can be given in comic form. The lecturer talks about visual description that she obtained from his mother. He asked her about the Second World War, and from her stories, the lecturer was able to form a visual memory, how the home, shelter looked like and its condition during the war. He used these clues to write the book he is working on.
Our civilization, which subsumes most of its predecessors, is a great ship steaming at speed into the future. It travels faster, further, and more laden than any before. We may not be able to foresee every reef and hazard, but by reading her compass bearing and headway, by understanding her design, her safety record, and the abilities of her crew, we can, I think, plot a wise course between the narrows and bergs looming ahead. And I believe we must do this without delay, because there are too many shipwrecks behind us. The vessel we are now aboard is not merely the biggest of all time, it's also the only one left. The future of everything we've accomplished since our intelligence evolved will depend on the wisdom of our actions over the next few years. Like all creatures, humans have made their way in the world so far by trial and error. Unlike other creatures, we have a presence so colossal that error is a luxury we can no longer afford. The world has grown too small to forgive us any big mistakes.
The lecturer compared our civilization with that of a ship. It showed similarities how our civilization is moving onwards like a ship faster into the future. Just like how a ship uses various factors like compass, abilities of crewmates etc. to predict incoming dangers, civilization should also advance accordingly by taking into account the already known conditions. With all the knowledge we have acquired so far, we should move ahead without making mistakes.
I'm a dietitian and I work in clinical weight loss research. Accurately estimating portion size is critical in research or real-world settings. For example, if you're trying to watch your weight and you're out to dinner and you're presented with a bowl of food, there's no really good way to actually estimate how much you're eating unless you're going to whip some scales out of your bag. So we wanted to find a more objective way for people to quantify what they're eating when they're out and about. I came up with a more hands-on approach. We got people to measure the dimensions of the food using the width of their fingers, and remembering back to primary school maths, we used the geometric volume formulas to estimate the weight of the food. To show you how this works, I've ordered a piece of lasagna, and that's my box, a glass of wine, and that's my cylinder, and I'm feeling pretty healthy, so I order some watermelon for dessert, and that's my wedge. So this lasagna is 7 by 5 by 4 fingers. In the future, I see this method being incorporated into smartphone applications. So you put your finger widths in along with your height and your weight, and the app will do all of the calculations for you. And then you've got a more accurate way to estimate the portion size.
The lecturer is a dietitian and speaks of how one can measure the amount of food intake instantly. Because it is not easy to do that when we are outside. She introduced a hands-on approach to make an estimate by using our fingers, something we did back in primary school math. Thereby, we can calculate the volume of any food even when we are dining. She further hopes this can be integrated into mobile apps, making our tasks much easier.
The sound of a cracking knee isn't particularly pleasant, but it gets worse when you listen up close.
It does for most people, but for me, it actually just makes me excited.
Omar Inan, an electrical engineer at Georgia Tech.
I actually feel like there's some real information in them that can be exploited for the purposes of helping people with rehab.
Inan's experience with cracking knees goes back to his days as an undergrad at Stanford, where he threw discus.
If I had a really hard workout, then the next day, of course, I'd be sore, but I would also sometimes feel that I would feel this basically catching or popping or creaking every now and then in my knee.
A few years later, he found himself building tiny microphones at a high-end audio company. So when he got to Georgia Tech and heard the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, wanted better tech for knee injuries, he thought, why not strap tiny microphones to people's knees to eavesdrop as their legs bend?
What we think it is the cartilage and bone rubbing against each other, the surfaces inside the knee rubbing against each other during those movements.
He and a team of physiologists and engineers built a prototype with stretchy athletic tape and a few tiny mics and skin sensors. And preliminary tests on athletes suggest the squishy sounds the device picks up are more erratic and more irregular in an injured knee than in a healthy one, which Enon says might allow patients and doctors to track healing after surgery. Details appear in the IEEE transactions on biomedical engineering.
The primary application we're targeting at first is to give people a decision aid during rehabilitation following an acute knee injury to help them understand when they can perform particular activities and when they can move to different intensities of particular activities.
A useful thing to take a crack at.
The lecture was a discussion regarding the noise of knee cracking. It is not deemed as a pleasant sound. Discussing with an electrical engineer, he disagrees, thinking that the noise may help people in rehab. He used to make knee cracking noise for an audio company by adding tiny microphones in knee joints. These noises, when further studied by researchers, lead to tracking the health condition and progress of knee injuries, as the noise is different for both a person with healthy knee and an injured knee.